It was a calm morning in the city park, where the sunlight filtered through tall trees and birds chirped peacefully. The park, usually bustling on weekends, was quiet today, as part of it was cordoned off for a military exercise scheduled for tomorrow. High-ranking officers were due to inspect the area. Colonel Maya Jackson, a black woman with over 20 years of military experience, entered the park wearing plain clothes, a black jacket and a small backpack. Though not in uniform, her confident stride and focused demeanor spoke volumes about her authority. Maya had a job to do, inspecting the designated areas for tomorrow's exercise. As Maya walked through the restricted zone, checking her phone for final details, Officer Thomas Mitchell, a white police officer, noticed her. He had been on the force for over 15 years, but his attitudes toward people who looked different from him often skewed toward prejudice. Seeing Maya enter the restricted area, Thomas felt a surge of discomfort and quickly approached her, hand near his gun. "Hey, stop right there," he called sharply. Maya turned to see him walking toward her. She stopped, taking a deep breath. "Yes, officer," she asked calmly. "This area is marked no entry," Thomas snapped, his voice authoritative. "Leave now or I'll arrest you for trespassing." Maya raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "I'm on duty here. I'm allowed to be here." Thomas stepped closer, inspecting her with a skeptical look. "Duty? What, are you cleaning up here or something? Or are you up to something shady?" Maya's patience was tested, but she stood her ground. "I'm Colonel Maya Jackson, U.S. Army. I'm inspecting the area for tomorrow's exercise." She handed him her military ID. Thomas barely glanced at it, smirking. "Army colonel? You don't look like a soldier to me. You think I'm stupid enough to fall for that?" Maya met his gaze firmly. "I suggest you treat me with the respect my rank deserves. You can verify my identity if you need to." Thomas grew more aggressive. "I don't need to verify anything. You're a nuisance. Get out now." Maya crossed her arms, standing tall. "Call your supervisor or the mayor's office. They'll confirm my authority here." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "I don't need to call anyone. You're just a problem." He took another step forward, his voice rising. "Get out or I'll arrest you." Maya's calm remained unshaken. "You can make that choice, officer, but if you continue, I'll report you directly to your superiors." Thomas sneered. "You think you can scare me? Try it." Maya's patience was running thin, but she knew the situation could escalate quickly. "You can escalate it if you wish, but you'll be the one who loses." The tension between Maya and Officer Mitchell thickened with every passing moment. Maya could feel the situation shifting, and her military training kicked in. She knew that patience was her best weapon. She stood straight, her eyes locked on Mitchell as he stepped closer, clearly agitated. "Don't you get it?" Mitchell's voice rose. "I'm the law here. You don't belong in this area. You're breaking the rules and I'm the one who enforces them." Maya remained calm, her breathing steady, despite the adrenaline running through her veins. "I'm not breaking any laws. I have every right to be here," she said firmly, her voice controlled yet unwavering. "You're overstepping your authority, officer. If you want to escalate this, that's on you." Mitchell's hand twitched toward his belt, where his gun sat holstered. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Maya. She kept her gaze steady, trying not to show any sign of fear. The last thing she wanted was for the situation to escalate further, but she also knew that she couldn't back down now. "You think you can intimidate me with that look?" Mitchell sneered, tightening his grip on his gun. "I've seen your kind before. You think you're better than me just because you're in the military? You're not special." Maya's mind raced, calculating her next move. She understood the danger now. Mitchell was not only feeling threatened by her presence, but also acting out of his own arrogance and prejudices. In her years of service, Maya had learned that an officer like him might not hesitate to make rash decisions if he felt his authority was being challenged. "I'm not here to make you feel less than, officer," she said, her voice calm but assertive. "I'm here to do my job, and I'll continue to do it, regardless of what you think." Mitchell took another step forward, now so close that Maya could feel his hot breath on her face. He glared at her, his eyes narrowed in defiance. "You think you're so tough? You want to play the military card? Let's see how tough you are when I arrest you for trespassing." Maya's patience had worn thin, but she knew better than to make a move too quickly. Any wrong move could lead to disaster. Still, she could feel the heat of the situation rising. Her voice remained steady as she spoke. "If you arrest me for doing my job, officer, you'll regret it," she said, her tone cold but firm. "I suggest you think carefully before you make that choice." Mitchell's hand was now visibly shaking as he gripped the handle of his gun, his uncertainty growing. Maya's calm demeanor only seemed to irritate him further. It was clear he wasn't used to being challenged like this, and it was beginning to unnerve him. "I'm warning you," Mitchell growled, taking another step closer. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Maya's heart raced, but her face remained composed. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, officer," she replied, "and I suggest you put the gun away before you make a bigger mistake." In that moment, Maya realized the danger was real. Mitchell's rising aggression and the weapon on his belt made it clear that he was about to take the situation to a new level. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, deliberately slow so as not to provoke him further. "If you want to escalate this, officer, you can. But I'm calling someone who will make sure this gets resolved properly," she said, her voice calm yet filled with authority. Mitchell's eyes flickered with doubt for the first time. He looked at her phone, clearly unsure of what to expect. "Who are you calling?" he demanded, trying to hide the unease in his voice. Maya didn't answer immediately. She dialed the mayor's number, a man she knew personally, and waited as the phone rang. The seconds stretched, the silence between them thick with tension. Mitchell's hand still hovered near his gun, but his posture began to shift, his confidence faltering. Maya's calculated calm was working, at least for now. Maya stood still, her finger pressed lightly against the phone screen as she waited for the mayor to pick up. The seconds ticked by, and the tension in the air was nearly unbearable. Mitchell's hand still hovered over his gun, but his confidence was fading with each passing moment. Maya could feel the uncertainty radiating from him, and she knew that the longer this standoff continued, the more likely it was that Mitchell would make a rash move. The phone finally clicked, and Maya's voice was calm and clear. "Hello, Mayor Thompson. This is Colonel Maya Jackson. I need you to come to the park immediately. There's an issue with one of your officers. I'll send you the exact location." Mitchell's face went pale as he realized who Maya was calling. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. His grip on his gun tightened again, and for a split second, Maya thought he might draw it. But she stood her ground, her eyes fixed on him, unflinching. "Colonel," the mayor's voice came through the phone. "I'm on my way." Maya ended the call and turned her gaze back to Mitchell, who was standing there sweating. His expression was a mix of disbelief and fear. The officer seemed to be coming to terms with the fact that he might have made a serious mistake, but he was still too proud to back down. "The mayor is on his way, officer," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "You can put the gun away now." Mitchell said nothing, but his hand moved slightly away from his belt. He stood there clearly uncomfortable, his eyes flicking nervously from Maya to the ground. His mind was racing, but it seemed as though his arrogance was beginning to give way to doubt. The minutes dragged on in silence. Maya stood calmly, her body language composed and controlled, while Mitchell fidgeted, unable to shake the mounting realization that he had just overplayed his hand. For the first time in their interaction, Maya noticed his hand shaking. Suddenly, the sound of an approaching car broke the silence. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and the mayor, dressed in a sharp suit, his presence commanding, stepped out of the vehicle. He took one look at the scene before striding over to Maya and Mitchell. "What's going on here, officer?" Mayor Thompson's voice was deep and authoritative. Maya stepped forward, her tone professional. "I was trying to explain to Officer Mitchell that I am here on official business, but he refused to listen. He even pulled his weapon on me, threatening to arrest me for trespassing." Mitchell's face turned crimson, and he opened his mouth to speak, but the mayor cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Shut up, Mitchell," he barked. "I don't want to hear it right now." Turning to Maya, the mayor's expression softened, and he offered an apology. "Colonel Jackson, I am truly sorry for this. This situation should never have escalated to this point. I will handle this personally." Maya nodded slightly, maintaining her professional composure. "Thank you, Mayor." Mitchell, still visibly rattled, took a step back, his eyes darting between Maya and the mayor. He realized too late that his actions had been reckless, and the consequences were about to unfold. "I'm going to speak with you later, Mitchell," the mayor continued, his voice firm. "For now, I want you to turn in your badge and your weapon. You're suspended until further notice." Mitchell's face drained of color. He hesitated but eventually complied, slowly removing his gun from its holster and handing it over. The reality of the situation was setting in. As the mayor turned to address him further, Maya stood silently, her mind still processing the events that had just unfolded. She couldn't forget the insults and threats Mitchell had hurled at her, but for now she was content to let the system take care of the rest. She had done her part. The atmosphere in the park shifted dramatically as the mayor took control of the situation. Officer Mitchell stood motionless, his face a mask of disbelief and embarrassment, while Maya watched him carefully. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that the right thing was about to happen, but it was tempered by the unpleasantness of how the situation had unfolded in the first place. "Mitchell," Mayor Thompson said sternly, turning to face the officer, "you're going to file a full report about what just happened. I'll also be personally reviewing the body camera footage. Don't think for a second that this will go unnoticed. I will ensure this is thoroughly investigated." Mitchell nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had just come crashing down on him. The mayor turned to Maya and gave her a nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for your patience, Colonel. I will take care of this from here. You've handled yourself with great professionalism." Maya gave a small nod in return. "I appreciate your help, Mayor. I'm just doing my job." As the mayor escorted Mitchell away to discuss the matter further, Maya stood there watching them go. Her thoughts were a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that the situation was under control now, but frustration at the fact that it had ever reached this point. It was hard to ignore the weight of what had just happened. The blatant prejudice, the threats, the humiliation. All of it had stemmed from a man who couldn't see beyond his own biases. Over the next few hours, word began to spread about the incident in the park. News outlets picked up the story, and social media buzzed with reactions from people who had heard about the altercation. While some expressed support for Maya and condemned Mitchell's actions, others took to defending the officer, claiming that he was just doing his job. But the overwhelming majority seemed to agree that the officer's behavior was unacceptable. Maya wasn't looking for attention, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as the support for her grew. In the days following the incident, Maya received messages from people all across the country. Individuals who had faced similar discrimination, who thanked her for standing up not just for herself, but for them as well. One letter that stood out to her was from a young Black mother who expressed gratitude for the courage Maya had shown. The letter read, "Because of you, I believe my daughter will have a better future. A future where she's not judged by the color of her skin or her gender. Thank you for being her role model." It was a powerful reminder of why Maya had chosen to serve in the military in the first place, not just for her own advancement, but to be an example, to challenge norms and inspire others to rise above the obstacles they faced. The investigation into Officer Mitchell's actions moved quickly. A team from the Internal Affairs Division, alongside representatives from the mayor's office, conducted a thorough review. Body cam footage, witness testimonies, and Maya's detailed account of the encounter painted a clear picture of misconduct and abuse of power. It didn't take long for the decision to be made. Mitchell was suspended from duty pending a full investigation into his behavior. A week later, he was officially fired for his actions, which included threats, racial discrimination, and failure to follow procedure. Maya wasn't satisfied with just the firing, though. She knew that the problem wasn't just Mitchell, it was a systemic issue within law enforcement, one that had to be addressed at its core. She spoke out publicly, urging for reform. At a press conference, Maya shared her experience and highlighted the larger issues at play. "We need to acknowledge the biases that exist within our institutions," Maya said, standing tall at the podium, her military uniform pressed and neat. "Racial prejudice and discrimination are not isolated incidents. They are part of a larger pattern that needs to be addressed. This isn't just about one officer. This is about changing the way we think and act toward one another. We need better education, better training, and more accountability." Her words resonated with many, sparking conversations about how law enforcement could improve in handling issues of discrimination and bias. Maya's bravery had sparked a movement for change, and it was clear that people were beginning to listen. But despite the outpouring of support, Maya wasn't focused on the accolades or praise. She remained committed to her goal of making real, lasting change. The press conference was merely a platform, a beginning, not the end of her mission. In the wake of the scandal, the mayor introduced new training programs for police officers, with a focus on eliminating bias and promoting respect for all individuals, regardless of race, gender, or background. Maya was invited to speak at these training sessions, where she shared her own story and encouraged officers to reflect on their own biases and prejudices. It wasn't an easy journey, but Maya was determined to make an impact. She wasn't just a symbol of courage for others, she was also an agent of change, using her position and experience to reshape how law enforcement interacted with the community. As for Mitchell, the fallout from his actions was significant. Unable to find another job in law enforcement, he enrolled in diversity and inclusion courses, initiated by Maya herself. Over time, he came to terms with his own biases and recognized the damage they had caused. It was a humbling process, but it was a necessary one. Mitchell learned that change didn't happen overnight, but it began with self-awareness and a willingness to grow. Maya's story continued to inspire people, and although the battle was far from over, it was clear that one small act of courage had set a larger movement in motion. The fight for justice, for equality, and for understanding was only just beginning. The weeks following the investigation were filled with mixed emotions for Maya. While she was proud of the changes that were being set into motion, she couldn't ignore the emotional toll the entire ordeal had taken on her. The incident in the park had sparked a deep conversation about racial bias, discrimination, and the systemic issues within law enforcement. Maya had become a symbol of courage and determination, but she knew that this was only one battle in a much larger war. Real change would take time. Maya continued to participate in the new police training programs, speaking at every session and sharing her experiences. She wasn't just there to lecture officers. She was there to encourage self-reflection and growth. She spoke not from a place of anger, but from a place of hope. Hope that one day people wouldn't have to be judged by the color of their skin, or their gender, or their uniform, but by their actions and character. One afternoon, Maya received a letter that stood out among the hundreds of messages she had gotten since the incident. It was from a young man named Daniel, a black teenager who had recently graduated from high school. He wrote about how he had grown up in a neighborhood where he was constantly reminded of the dangers of prejudice. But Maya's story had inspired him to pursue a career in law enforcement. He wanted to be an officer who served with integrity, who protected people and respected them, regardless of who they were. Colonel Jackson, the letter began, I just wanted to thank you for being a role model for me. I want to become an officer who is kind, fair, and just. You showed me that it's possible to be an officer and still stand up for what's right. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm going to make sure that I never forget what you taught me. Maya sat for a moment, reading the letter. She felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. This was why she had fought so hard. Not for recognition, not for accolades, but for the hope that one person's story could inspire others to create a better world. Daniel's words were a reminder that change didn't just come from policies or training sessions. It came from individuals who were willing to take a stand and be the change they wanted to see. Meanwhile, Officer Mitchell, after completing his mandatory diversity and inclusion courses, began to rebuild his life. It wasn't easy, and he knew he could never fully undo the damage he had caused, but he was learning. Slowly, he became more self-aware of his biases and began applying what he had learned in his personal life. He reached out to Maya, offering a heartfelt apology. While Maya didn't expect forgiveness right away, she appreciated that Mitchell was trying to change. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Months later, the changes in the police department were noticeable. Officers were more aware of their biases, and community relations improved. There were still challenges, and there was still work to be done, but it was clear that the conversation had shifted. Maya knew the journey wasn't over, but she had made a difference. One day, as she walked through the park again, this time in uniform, inspecting the site for another upcoming military event, she paused for a moment, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The morning sun warmed her face, and for the first time since the incident, she allowed herself to relax. She had fought for justice, and although the road had been long and difficult, she had seen change take root. The legacy of that day in the park, the moment when she had stood firm against injustice, would live on not just in her heart, but in the hearts of everyone who had been inspired by her courage. It wasn't just about one officer or one confrontation. It was about changing the way people thought, the way they treated each other, and the way they stood up for what was right. Maya knew that her fight wasn't over, but for today she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that she had made a difference, not just for herself, but for others too.